Corinne Mitchell had always believed in the power of visible success. Not just success, visible success. The kind that made neighbors pause at their mailboxes, the kind that told a story before you even opened your mouth. At 52 years old, she'd spent 3 decades building a narrative, from divorce-era struggle to Phoenix rising from ashes. The white Mercedes-Benz C-Class, delivered just 4 days ago, was the final period on that sentence. She stood in her driveway at 6:47 a.m., coffee in hand, watching the morning sun paint gold across the hood. The car had cost her $68,000. Not a fortune for some, but for Corinne, a small-town real estate agent in rural Missouri, it represented something sacred, proof that she'd made it. "It's gorgeous," a voice called from across the street. Corinne turned to see Patricia Holt, her neighbor of 8 years, jogging past with her exercise band. Patricia was younger, maybe 45, with that effortless athleticism that made Corinne's gym membership feel like a lie. "Thank you," Corinne said, setting down her coffee to run a hand along the Merced's side mirror. "Figured I deserved it. 23 properties sold last quarter." "That's amazing," Patricia said, but her eyes had already moved on. She was the type who wore Lululemon to do her groceries. Corinne had learned not to compete with Patricia directly. Inside the house, Corinne's daughter Emma was supposed to be getting ready for school. Instead, she was on her phone at the kitchen counter, still in her pajamas, scrolling through something that made her face glow blue in the darkness. "Phone off, you're going to be late," Corinne said, not for the first time that week. Emma was 16, caught in that impossible age where every parental instruction felt like a personal attack. She'd been that way since Corinne started dating Mark 6 months ago, sullen, dismissive, hostile in the particular way teenagers master. Corinne hadn't expected her daughter to be thrilled. She'd been alone for 8 years after the divorce. But she also hadn't expected Emma to make comments about Mark's age. He was only 7 years older than Emma, or to suggest that Corinne was trying too hard to seem young. "I'm ready," Emma mumbled, not looking up. "You're in your pajamas." "I'm going to change." Emma still didn't move. Through the kitchen window, Corinne could see the Mercedes. She could see herself reflected in its gleaming side panel, a woman in an expensive dress with salon blonde hair standing in a kitchen that had cost $40,000 to renovate. This was who she'd become. This was the arrival point. "Now, Emma, we leave in 12 minutes. Emma finally stood, moving with the exaggerated slowness of the deliberately defiant. As she passed her mother, she made a comment under her breath. Corinne caught only part of it, like nobody cares. Corinne didn't chase it. Some battles weren't worth fighting at 6:50 a.m. By 7:15, they were in the Mercedes. Emma sat in the passenger seat, still not fully dressed, her school uniform skirt over pajama bottoms, her hair in a haphazard ponytail. She had the car window down and her phone pressed to her ear. "What is this?" Corinne asked, pulling onto Hickory Road. "Is someone on the phone?" "It's just Sage," Emma said. "She's telling me about what happened last night at Jason's house." Corinne didn't know who Jason was. That was becoming increasingly true of her daughter's life. There were people and events and inside jokes that existed in a world Emma inhabited without her mother. It stung in a way Corinne tried not to show. "Put the phone away. Seatbelt rule, no devices." Emma hung up and complied, but with a sigh so theatrical it could have powered the car itself. The drive to Jefferson High School took 7 minutes. Corinne used it to mentally rehearse the day ahead. She had a showing at 9:00 a.m., the Riverside Properties, a flip that wasn't moving as quickly as projected, a listing appointment at 11:30, the Hendersons' farmhouse, which would be a nightmare because Deb Henderson wanted to price it at market value despite its septic situation, and a meeting with her broker at 2:00 p.m. to discuss the quarterly numbers. She'd need to stop by the office supply store for presentation materials. Maybe grab lunch at that new Thai place downtown that everyone was talking about, the kind of place where showing up mattered, where being seen mattered. When they pulled up to the school, Emma had already unbuckled herself and was reaching for the door. "Have a good day," Corinne called as her daughter climbed out. "I love you." Emma turned back, and for just a moment there was something sad in her expression. Not anger, sadness, like she was looking at a stranger. "Love you too," Emma said and closed the door. Corinne watched her daughter walk toward the school building, backpack slung over one shoulder, merging into the stream of teenagers moving through the parking lot. How had Emma gotten so tall? When had they stopped having conversations? She pulled out of the parking lot and headed downtown, mentally tallying the things she needed to accomplish before the Riverside showing. The Mercedes handled beautifully, smooth, responsive, with that new car smell that Karen had specifically asked the dealer to preserve. Some people thought that was silly. Karen understood. Scent was memory. Scent was identity. The smell of new leather was the smell of arrival. At 8:55 a.m., Karen pulled up to the Riverside Properties, a two-story colonial on a corner lot that she'd taken on consignment 3 months ago. The owner, Mrs. Riverside, a widow, 74, moving to be near her daughter in Phoenix, had listed it at $289,000. It should have sold in a month. The market had shifted. The Riverside house had everything on paper: good bones, recent roof, recently updated kitchen. But in person, it had a problem that no listing photo could hide. It was dark. The trees had grown too tall around it, blocking the natural light that made or broke a sale in the Midwest. Karen had suggested some landscaping, but Mrs. Riverside didn't have the money for that. Not yet. Not while the house wasn't selling. Karen pulled into the driveway and checked her phone. 8:57 a.m. The showing was with a couple from Springfield, the Kellogg's, first-time buyers, pre-approved, interested in this neighborhood specifically because the school district ranked well. Karen had reviewed their file twice. They were serious. At 9:02 a.m., a Honda Civic turned onto Hickory Road and pulled up behind the Mercedes. Karen watched as a man in his 30s and a woman in her late 20s climbed out. Both had that anxious, hopeful expression of people spending the largest amount of money they'd ever spent on anything. Karen knew this look intimately. She'd worn it herself once during the early years of her marriage to Richard, when they'd bought their first house together. "The Kellogg's," Karen called, climbing out of the Mercedes. "I'm Karen Mitchell, welcome." What happened next would later be analyzed and reanalyzed. By Karen, by her insurance company, by the Kellogg's lawyer, and eventually by the evening news. At 9:04 a.m., a section of fencing at Harker's Farm, approximately half a mile northeast of the Riverside property, gave way. The eastern fence line, which had been deteriorating for months under the weight of endless rain and neglect, finally surrendered. The break was clean, a 40-foot section that simply collapsed inward, leaving nothing between the pasture and the open road. The cow, a 1,400-pound Hereford named Duchess, who had been grazing peacefully, lifted her head at the sound of the collapse. She'd never been outside this fence line in her 7 years of life. The world beyond it was unknown, terrifying, and absolutely irresistible. Duchess bolted. Her hooves found the county road, then Highway 44, moving south without any sense of direction or purpose, only instinct. Run, escape, move. Karen was in the middle of showing the Kellogg's the front room. Yes, the darkness issue, but look at the crown molding, the original hardwood floors, when she heard it. A sound like thunder, but wrong. Rhythmic, getting closer. "Is someone doing construction nearby?" Mrs. Kellogg asked. "I don't think so," Karen said. She moved to the window and looked out toward the street. What she saw in that moment would divide her life into before and after. The cow, massive, wild-eyed, covered in dust and desperation, was moving down Hickory Road at full gallop. It was heading directly toward the Riverside house, more specifically toward the driveway, more specifically toward the white Mercedes-Benz C-Class. "Oh my God," Karen whispered. The Kellogg's moved to the window beside her. They saw it too. What happened next took approximately 3.2 seconds. The cow, panicking at the sight of the car, did not slow down. It did not divert. Instead, it seemed to accelerate, as if the Mercedes represented the ultimate threat that needed to be eliminated. The animal's massive shoulder struck the driver's side of the vehicle at approximately 35 miles per hour. The impact was not subtle. The Mercedes, a car designed with precision engineering and German efficiency, had never met a 1,400-pound Hereford before. It was not prepared. The driver's side crumpled inward like someone had grabbed it and twisted. The window exploded in a crystal shower. The mirror snapped backward at an impossible angle. The door caved in. The cow, after delivering this devastating blow, continued moving forward, using its body to push the car sideways across the driveway. The Mercedes scraped along the pavement with a sound like 1,000 fingernails on a blackboard, metal shrieking against asphalt. It slammed into the fence, where it finally stopped. The cow, satisfied or simply exhausted, stood trembling beside the destroyed vehicle. There was blood on its flank. It had torn itself on the broken metal, and its breathing was ragged. It made a low, pained sound. For a moment, there was complete silence except for that breathing and the settling of broken glass. Then Karen made a sound she hadn't made in years. It came from somewhere deep, somewhere primal, a scream of pure denial. No, not real, not possible, not to her, not now, not this. The Kellogg stood frozen beside her, staring. Mrs. Kellogg's hand had come up to cover her mouth. Karen ran. She didn't think about the showing, about the Merceds, about anything rational. She ran out of the Riverside house and across the driveway toward her car. The cow, startled by her movement, bolted back the way it had come, its panicked hooves clattering on the road until it disappeared behind the tree line. Karen stood in front of her Mercedes and stared at it. The car was destroyed, not damaged, destroyed. The entire driver's side had been folded in on itself. The windshield was spiderwebbed from impact. The hood had a deep concave depression, a perfect imprint of cow's shoulder. The passenger's side was scraped raw, metal showing beneath the white paint like exposed skin. She'd owned it for 4 days. Behind her, she could hear the Kelloggs walking back toward their car. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their relief that this disaster was not theirs. "Thank you for showing us the property," Mr. Kellogg said awkwardly. We'll be in touch." Karen didn't respond. She was looking at her car, at what used to be her car, and thinking about the things she'd told herself this morning. About arrival, about proof, about visible success. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her broker. "Where are you? We have the 2 p.m. with Henderson." Karen didn't respond. She opened her phone's camera and took a photo of the destroyed Mercedes from multiple angles. Evidence, documentation, proof that this had really happened. Another text came through, this time from Mark. "Lunch, I know a place." Karen stared at the message. Mark was her boyfriend, 7 years younger than her, with startup money and an MBA from a school she'd never heard of. He worked in Kansas City and drove down on weekends. He was attractive in that ageless millennial way, and he made her feel alive in a way she'd stopped feeling years ago. He also called her babe in a tone that might have been affectionate or might have been dismissive. Karen could never quite tell. She deleted the message without responding. At 9:47 a.m., the county sheriff pulled up to the Riverside property. Karen had called them automatically, the way she would have called for an ambulance if she'd been shot. It was procedure. It was what you did when catastrophe struck. Deputy Thomas Rodriguez was a man in his 50s who'd grown up in the area. He knew about car accidents and property disputes. He did not know about cows. "The animal came from Harker's farm," he said after taking photos and statements. "The fence came down. Mr. Harker's known for letting things slide, maintenance, repairs, proper fencing. This isn't really a surprise." Rodriguez paused. "Your insurance will want to know. This is technically a livestock incident. The farm's liable." "How long will that take?" Karen asked. "The insurance, I mean, to resolve." "Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on Harker, depends on his insurance, depends on how cooperative everyone wants to be." Karen looked at her Mercedes again. In the morning light, it looked even worse than she'd thought, not just damaged, but destroyed, totaled, obliterated. "Is the cow okay?" she heard herself ask. Rodriguez looked surprised by the question. "Harker took it back to the farm. It's got some injuries, cuts from the impact, but it'll live. Better shape than your car, I'll tell you that much." Karen nodded. She understood the logic. She even understood the irony. But understanding and feeling were operating on different channels right now. At 10:15 a.m., she called her boss. "Karen, where the hell are you?" he demanded. "The Kellogg's called me directly. They said there was some kind of incident at the property." "There was an accident," Karen said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, hollow. "A cow got loose from a neighboring farm. It hit my car. I'm at the Riverside property now." There was a pause. "Karen, are you okay? Are the clients okay?" "Everyone's fine. The car is. The car is totaled. I'm filing an insurance claim." "Okay," her boss said, and she could hear him recalibrating, reorganizing his day to accommodate this information. "Okay, take the rest of the day. We'll talk tomorrow. Do you need anything?" "No," Karen said. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was standing in a driveway in rural Missouri looking at a destroyed Mercedes that she'd spent $68,000 on 4 days ago, and she was starting to understand that arrival was a mirage. Success was a fragile thing, proof that you'd made it was just a car. just a thing. And things could be destroyed by forces entirely beyond your control. The insurance claim didn't resolve in weeks or months. It resolved in bureaucratic limbo, the place where disputed liability goes to die. Corinne's insurance company, Safe Harbor Mutual, immediately determined that the incident fell under acts of third-party negligence, and therefore belonged to the at-fault party's liability coverage. Harker's Farms Insurance Company, represented by a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Chen, immediately disputed this classification. According to their interpretation, wild animals were acts of God, and therefore uninsurable under standard policies. They went back and forth for 3 weeks while Corinne drove a rental car, a silver Nissan Altima from Enterprise that smelled like French fries and broken dreams. The rental cost $45 per day out of pocket. Corinne was told to keep receipts. The Mercedes sat in the driveway of her home, exactly where it had been towed. She couldn't bring herself to move it to a repair shop or a salvage yard. It was like leaving a dead animal on display, a monument to poor judgment and cosmic cruelty. By week 2, the story had spread through their small town in the way that small-town stories do, through phone calls, through chance meetings at the grocery store, through texts in group chats. Most of the narrative followed the truth, but some of it didn't. Corinne heard versions where she'd been driving the car when the cow hit, she hadn't. Where she'd been severely injured, she wasn't. Where the Mercedes had exploded into flames, it hadn't. The lie that bothered her most was the one that painted her as careless, as if she'd left the gate open or somehow caused the fence to fail. Patricia Holt, her jogger neighbor, called her 3 days after the incident. "Corinne, I wanted to check in," Patricia said, her voice carrying that practiced sympathy that people use when they're gossip gathering. "I heard about your car. That must be devastating." "It's fine," Corinne said. "Insurance will cover it eventually." "That's good," Patricia said, but there was a pause. "I was also wondering, do you think you'll have to move? I mean, if it becomes a safety issue." Corinne felt something inside her go cold. "Why would I move?" "I just mean, if livestock is getting loose on the road, maybe the area's not as safe as we thought. I was already thinking of selling, actually. The school district is shifting, and honestly, I've been looking at something closer to the city." Corinne understood. Patricia wasn't worried about livestock. Patricia was worried about her property values. Patricia was thinking about the next showing, the next buyer, the next person who would pull into her driveway and wonder if this was the kind of neighborhood where cows demolished cars. "I'm not planning to move," Corinne said coldly. After she hung up, Corinne sat with the words, "Not planning to move." But was that true? Was that a decision she'd actually made, or was that something people said when they were in shock? The Mercedes sat in her driveway, mute and ruined. By week 3, Corinne had filed 14 different insurance reports. She'd provided the same information to 3 different people at Safe Harbor. She'd spoken to Linda Chen twice, both times with a growing sense that she was not the customer in this transaction. She was the inconvenience. It was during the 3rd conversation with Linda Chen that things shifted. "The issue," Linda explained in the way of someone who'd said this many times before, "is that Mr. Harker's primary policy specifically excludes coverage for fence failures related to weather damage. The fence came down because of rain saturation, which is considered an act of nature. Therefore, the failure is not covered under his liability." "But it's his responsibility to maintain the fence," Corinne said. "That's a civil matter between you and Mr. Harker," Linda said. "It's not an insurance matter." Corinne called Harker. She'd looked up his number before she called. Harker's farm had been operating for 42 years. The website featured photos of cattle grazing peacefully, with testimonials from satisfied customers who'd bought their products at farmers' markets across Missouri. The man who answered the phone sounded elderly and tired. "Harker," he said. "Mr. Harker, this is Corinne Mitchell. I'm the woman whose car was hit by your cow." There was a pause. "I heard about that," Harker said. "Your fence failed," Corinne said. "It collapsed and let the animal onto the road. I'm asking you to cover the damages. My insurance company says it's not their problem, it's yours." "Your car," Harker said, and she could hear something in his voice shift. It was anger, but underneath it was something else. Desperation. "Your car cost 70 grand. You want me to pay for it." "The damage is approximately $52,000, Corinne said. "The insurance company is saying the car's likely totaled. I have receipts, photographs, estimates." I'm a farmer, Harker interrupted. I work with livestock, fences break. I've been working on that section, it's in the queue, I've had other priorities. Your cow destroyed my car, Karen said, her voice rising. And you're telling me that your priorities didn't include maintaining a fence that keeps an animal the size of a cow contained. Do you understand what feed costs? Harker shot back. Do you understand what equipment costs? I'm not getting wealthy out here, lady. I'm surviving. And now you want me to pay for your Mercedes because you felt like living in a rural area. The call ended there. Harker hung up on her. Karen listened to the dial tone and felt something inside her crystallize into something hard and dark. She called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Patricia Salvo, not Patricia Holt, thank God. And she worked out of a small office in the city, 30 minutes away. She had sharp features and kind eyes, and she took exactly one phone call with Karen before arriving at a conclusion. It's a small claim, Patricia Salvo said. By that, I mean it's over the small claims limit, $5,000. But it's the kind of case where the defendant doesn't have insurance to cover it, which means even if you win, collection is a nightmare. You could spend $3,000 to $5,000 in legal fees to recover $52,000, and then Mr. Harker would fight payment, and you'd spend more on a collection action, and 3 years would pass. By then, you'll wish you'd just let it go. So what do I do? Karen asked. You could sue in circuit court, but same problems. Or you could negotiate a settlement with Harker directly. That's actually your best option. He won't even answer my calls now. Then you get him a written notice that you're prepared to file. Sometimes that changes a person's mind. Karen sent a formal letter on lawyer letterhead. It cost $400. It read like a legal threat wrapped in professional language. She had it delivered certified mail, signature required, so Harker would have to acknowledge receipt. She never got a response. By week 4, the rental car, the silver Nissan with its French fry smell, had become a symbol of Karen's new reality. She drove it to showings. She drove it to the grocery store. She drove it to work. The Mercedes still sat in her driveway. Emma barely acknowledged the situation. She'd asked once if the car was okay, and Karen had given a one-sentence answer, and that was the end of it. Emma seemed to be retreating further into her phone, further into the world of Sage and Jason and people Karen didn't know. Mark called from Kansas City. Babe, I heard about the car thing, he said. That's crazy, wild. It's a disaster, Karen said. Yeah, but it's just stuff, right? Mark said. You're okay, that's what matters. Just stuff. Karen wanted to reach through the phone and shake him, but she didn't. She'd learned that when someone that young called your significant problems just stuff. They weren't being insensitive, they were just being young. They believed in a kind of infinite replacement. There was always another car, another job, another relationship. Karen used to believe that too. She wasn't sure when she'd stopped. When are you coming down? She asked instead. This weekend, Mark said. Maybe. I've got this pitch meeting on Saturday that could be big. I'll let you know. He let her know Sunday night via text that the pitch had required him to stay through the weekend. There was a dinner. There were follow-ups, business. Karen understood. She'd built her career on the same principle. That work required sacrifice, that saying no was a luxury, that being available, being professional, being present was what separated the successful from the stuck. But understanding and feeling were different channels again. By week 5, the insurance companies had settled into their positions like armies in a stalemate. Safe Harbor Mutual was not going to pay. Harker's insurance was not going to pay. Karen's options had narrowed to exactly one: sue Harker directly and hope he had assets worth pursuing. Her lawyer estimated the case would cost $5,000 minimum and could easily exceed $8,000 before the dust settled. Karen had that money. It was in her savings account, accumulating interest alongside her college fund for Emma, her retirement contributions, her emergency reserves. It was the money that was supposed to be for emergencies. And this was an emergency, wasn't it? She sat at her kitchen table one evening. Emma was at Sage's house doing homework, or that's what she claimed, and looked at a spreadsheet on her laptop. The numbers were there, black and white, the cost to sue, the likely recovery, the timeline, the risks. She also looked at her bank statements. The $68,000 Mercedes purchase, the $45 day rental fees, the $400 lawyer consultation, the property taxes that had increased 3% this year, which was unexpected and unpleasant. The home equity line of credit she'd opened during the renovations, which was drawing interest at a rate slightly above her comfort level. The financial reality was this. Karen was successful by the standards of her small town and her demographic. She was not wealthy. Wealth, Karen understood, was the luxury of not thinking about money. Karen thought about money constantly. She closed the laptop. The next day, Harker's lawyer sent her a letter. Harker was countersuing for trespass and property damage. Karen's car had, technically, scraped against his fence, and he was claiming she owed him for repairs to the fence and for veterinary costs related to treating Duchess's injuries. The amount, $8,300. Karen read the letter 3 times. She sat in the office in her real estate space, a small desk in a shared office with 3 other agents, and read this letter 3 times. The coffee in her mug went cold. Then she called Patricia Salvo again. "That's a bluff," Patricia said. "He's hopping you'll settle, but Karen, I need to be honest with you. The cost of fighting this, the real cost, including your time and emotional energy, might exceed what you'd actually recover." "So I should just let him win," Karen said. "I don't know that anyone's winning here," Patricia said gently. "You're both losing. That's usually how these things end." After they hung up, Karen did something she hadn't allowed herself to do in weeks. She cried. She cried at her desk in the shared office with the 3 other agents, and when they asked if she was okay, she said yes, she was fine, just allergies. One of them, a woman named Rhonda who'd been in real estate for 20 years, came over and sat in the chair across from her. "The cow thing?" Rhonda asked. Karen nodded. "I heard about it," Rhonda said. "Listen, I've been in this business 2 decades. I've seen people destroyed by less. The fact that you're still functional is actually impressive." She paused. "But let me give you some advice. Sometimes the universe is telling you something. Sometimes the universe is saying, this doesn't matter as much as you think it does." "The universe destroyed my Mercedes," Karen said. "The universe destroyed your car," Rhonda corrected. "That's different. The car is replaceable. The universe, the peace, the sense that you're enough as you are, that's not replaceable. And you're going to burn through a lot of energy and money trying to prove a point that's already been made." After work, Karen drove the silver Nissan rental to the Mercedes dealer. She parked it in the lot and walked inside. The same salesman who'd sold her the white Mercedes was working. His name was Derek, and he'd called her for weeks after the purchase, checking in, making sure she was satisfied. "Karen," he said, his face lighting up, "how are you loving the C-Class? You've had it for, what, a month now?" "5 weeks, Karen said. "I need to talk to you about something." She told him the story. Derek's face shifted through several emotions, confusion, then sympathy, then something that looked almost like relief. Relief, she realized, because this wasn't his fault. This was an act of God or an act of cow. "So here's what I'm thinking," Karen said. "I want to upgrade. I want something different. I want something practical." "Different how?" Derek asked carefully. "I want a used RAV4, Karen said. "Something reliable, something that costs half what that Mercedes cost, something that doesn't matter if it gets damaged." Derek blinked. "You want to downgrade significantly. Can I ask why?" "Because I realized something," Karen said. "That car was supposed to prove something, and it did. It proved that things don't matter as much as we pretend they do." 30 minutes later, Karen had traded in the rental car and was driving a 2019 RAV4 that had 70,000 miles on it. The color was silver gray. The interior was practical. It had heated seats and a good stereo and none of the prestige of the Mercedes. She loved it immediately. When she pulled into her driveway, Emma was home. Her daughter stood at the window, watching her get out of the vehicle. "That's not your Mercedes," Emma said when Karen came inside. "No," Karen said. "I decided I didn't want that car." "Because of the cow?" "Because of a lot of things," Karen said. "But yes, the cow was part of it." Emma studied her mother like she was trying to solve an equation. "Are you okay?" Karen realized that was the first time in weeks Emma had asked her anything that wasn't logistical or defensive. "I'm getting there," Karen said. "Yeah, I'm getting there." That night, Karen sent an email to Patricia Salvo, copying Harker's lawyer. In it, she proposed a settlement. She would pay Harker $2,500 for the fence repairs and veterinary costs. Harker would drop his counterclaim. Both parties would agree to stop pursuing legal action and let the insurance companies handle the original claim or not. It didn't matter. it was over. The response came back within 2 hours. Harker's lawyer agreed, pending Harker's approval. Harker approved by noon the next day. The Mercedes sat in her driveway for another week before Karen arranged for it to be picked up by a salvage company. She got $4,200 for it, which was less than half of what she'd paid. She applied that money toward the settlement and felt lighter for it. The RAV4 remained parked in her driveway, practical and unpretentious. Karen went back to work. She sold 3 properties in the following month, including the Riverside house, which finally sold to the Kellogg's for $279,000, a $10,000 reduction from the asking price, but it sold. She closed one deal with a couple looking at the area specifically because of the school district, and another with a young professional who was establishing a remote office. She also fired Mark. He showed up on a Friday evening with wine and takeout Thai food, ready for a reconnection weekend. Karen sat on her couch in her practical house with her practical car sitting in the driveway and realized that Mark represented the same thing the Mercedes had represented. The story you told yourself about who you were supposed to be. "I don't think this is working," she told him. Mark looked confused. "What, the weekend?" "The relationship," Karen said. "Us, I've been thinking about it a lot and I don't think we want the same things." "We could want the same things," Mark said. "We just have to talk about it." "You're 7 years younger than me," Karen said, "and you're going to be successful in a way that requires a different kind of partner than I am. Someone who hasn't spent 30 years building a life in one place. Someone who's willing to uproot and move to wherever the startup takes you. I'm not that person. I don't want to be." Mark didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. He just accepted it. He'd already moved on mentally. There was someone else, probably. There was always someone else when you were young and uncomplicated. After he left, Karen stood in her living room and felt empty. Not sad, empty, like a space had been cleared and she didn't know what to put there yet. She was still figuring that out when the call came from the hospital. Emma had tried to hide it. Looking back, Karen would see all the signs. The way Emma had stopped eating with the family, the way she'd moved away from Karen's touch, the way she'd seemed smaller somehow, compressed, folded in on herself. The anxiety attack happened at school. Emma was in physics class when her chest suddenly felt tight. She couldn't breathe. Her hands went numb, and in that moment of panic, Emma was certain she was dying. The school nurse called 911. Karen got a call from the hospital while she was showing a property. She excused herself, sat in her RAV4 in the parking lot, and listened to a nurse explain that Emma was stable, but they'd like to keep her for observation, and would she like to speak to her daughter. The panic of that moment, the pure animal panic of thinking her daughter was in danger, put everything else into perspective. The Mercedes didn't exist. The settlement didn't matter. The real estate deals evaporated into irrelevance. Karen drove directly to the hospital. Emma was in the emergency department when Karen arrived, lying on a hospital bed in a cloth gown, looking smaller than she'd ever looked. An IV was in her arm. A heart monitor was tracking her pulse. "Hi," Karen said quietly from the doorway. Emma's eyes opened. They were red from crying. "I'm sorry," Emma said. "Don't apologize," Karen said, moving to the bed. She took her daughter's hand carefully as if Emma might break. "What happened?" "I couldn't breathe," Emma said. "My chest felt like there was a weight on it, and my hands got all tingly. I thought I was having a heart attack." An ER doctor came in and explained that Emma had experienced an anxiety attack. The physical symptoms were real: increased heart rate, muscle tension, tingling in the extremities. But there was no cardiac event. However, given the severity of the attack, they'd like to keep her overnight for observation and potentially refer her to a psychiatrist. "An anxiety attack," Karen repeated. "But Emma's not anxious, are you?" She looked at her daughter. Emma's lower lip trembled. "I'm anxious about everything," she said quietly. "I'm anxious about school and about what happens after school and about the world and about you." "About me?" Karen said. "Honey, why would you be anxious about me?" "Because you're so stressed all the time," Emma said. "You're always working or worrying about money or about Mark or about your car or about what people think, and I can feel it. I can feel you not being okay, and I can't fix it, and that makes me anxious too." Karen sat on the edge of the hospital bed and felt something shift inside her. This was her daughter, her smart, beautiful, complicated daughter, telling her that Emma's mental health was being compromised by Karen's visible stress about visible success. "I didn't know," Karen said. "I know you didn't," Emma said. "But I'm telling you now, I need you to be okay, not successful, okay?" Over the next 72 hours, Emma was evaluated by the hospital's psychiatrist, who diagnosed her with generalized anxiety disorder and recommended therapy. The doctor prescribed medication and referred them to a therapist who specialized in adolescents. The hospital's social worker went over Karen's insurance, which covered mental health services. Thank God. There were suddenly a lot of things to organize and coordinate and manage. Karen took 3 days off work, something she'd never done except for vacations. She sat with Emma. They talked. They didn't have perfect conversations, but they had conversations. Real ones. Emma talked about Sage and Jason and her fears about college and boys and what it meant to be a young woman in 2024. She talked about how much pressure she felt to be perfect, to have her life figured out, to have everything lined up. Karen listened and realized that Emma had inherited this from her. This belief that success had to be visible, that appearing to have it all together was more important than actually having it together. "Where did you learn that?" Karen asked. "From you," Emma said simply. Karen wanted to argue. Instead, she said, "I'm sorry." After Emma was discharged, Karen went back to work, but something had changed. She was still good at real estate. She still closed deals. But she was no longer building a narrative of success. She was just building a life, a real one. She started eating dinner with Emma 3 nights a week without her phone on the table. She cut back her hours slightly, something her broker initially resisted until she explained that her daughter was managing anxiety and they needed to prioritize that. He surprised her by being supportive. He had teenagers too, he understood. She paid off the home equity line of credit, a small amount per month, but every payment felt like reclaiming something. The Mercedes was gone, Mark was gone, the narrative was gone. What remained was just Karen, 52, a single mother, living in rural Missouri, driving a practical RAV4, showing houses to people, trying to figure out who she was when she stopped trying to prove who she was. 4 months after the cow destroyed the Mercedes, Karen was at a farmer's market in the city. She was buying vegetables for a dinner she was cooking. The kind of dinner she and Emma had planned together, nothing fancy, just food that they both liked. She saw Mr. Harker. He was selling vegetables from his farm at a booth. Tomatoes, corn, greens, cucumbers, all of it looked beautiful and real and actually grown in the earth. He was talking to a customer about growing season and rainfall and crop rotation. Karen almost walked past, but something made her stop. She walked up to the booth and looked at him. He recognized her immediately. His expression shifted from pleasant vendor to something more wary. "Mr. Harker," Karen said. "Miss Mitchell," he said carefully. "I wanted to apologize," Karen said. The words felt strange in her mouth. She hadn't planned them. "For how I treated you after the incident. I was angry and I took it out on you. I shouldn't have." Harker was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I should have fixed the fence sooner. You were right. I had put it off too long." "Well," Karen said, "yes, but I could have been more understanding about the constraints you were operating under. I was focused on what I'd lost. I didn't think about what you were dealing with." Harker nodded. "Duchess, that's the cow. She's never gotten loose since. Fixed the fence properly. Paid more attention to maintenance." "That's good," Karen said. "I'm glad." They stood there for an awkward moment. Then Harker said, "How's the car situation? Did insurance work out?" "Eventually," Karen said. "I ended up getting something different, something more practical. Honestly, it's been better." "That's good," Harker said. He paused. "Your daughter, is she okay? I heard something about an incident at the school." Karen was surprised that he knew. Small town, she reminded herself. News traveled. "She's doing better," Karen said. "We're working through some things. Thank you for asking." As Karen was leaving, Harker called out, "Miss Mitchell." When she turned back, he said, "Thank you for understanding, about the fence, about all of it." "Thank you for trying," Karen said. She bought tomatoes from his booth. They were beautiful, deep red, fragrant, real. She paid cash and took the bag to her car and drove back to her practical house in her practical car. Emma was waiting for her when she got home, actually sitting in the living room instead of in her room on her phone. They made dinner together, a salad with those tomatoes, grilled chicken, pasta. They ate at the table talking about their days. Emma had had a good session with her therapist. Karen had shown 2 houses, normal things, unspectacular things. After dinner, they sat on the couch and watched a movie, something Emma had selected, not Karen. It was funny and gentle and required nothing of them except to be present. When it was over, Emma said, "Mom, thank you." "For what?" Karen asked. "For being different," Emma said, "for trying." Karen put her arm around her daughter and held her and felt, for the first time in a long time, like maybe she was starting to understand what mattering actually meant. The anxiety medications were working. Emma had bad days, days when the weight returned and sitting in class felt like sitting at the bottom of the ocean. But they were fewer. The therapy was helping more. Emma's therapist, a woman named Dr. Liu who specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy, had taught Emma how to identify anxiety spirals before they became full panic attacks, how to ground herself, how to separate her self-worth from her performance. It was the same advice Karen realized that she needed to hear. 6 months after the incident, Karen had reduced her workload to 4 showings per week. She was no longer competing for the title of top agent in her office. She'd handed that off to a younger woman named Brittany, who actually wanted it, who was buying the outfits and getting the laser hair removal and building the personal brand. Karen watched Brittany do it and felt nothing except a vague sense of relief that it wasn't her anymore. The Mercedes incident had become a kind of parable in her town. People still brought it up. "Remember when that cow destroyed Karen's car?" It was told as a funny story now, a little laugh about rural life and unpredictability. Karen had learned to laugh along. It was just a car. It had just been a cow. But something else was happening in the aftermath that nobody outside of Karen's immediate circle knew about. The lawsuit that Harker was fighting, the one with the fence and the liability and the animals escaping, it had gotten worse. After Karen's case settled, 2 other incidents happened. A teenager had hit the fence with his truck when he swerved to avoid Duchess escaping again. A woman on horseback had been spooked by the cow and had fallen, requiring a hospital visit and physical therapy. And Harker was being sued by both of them. Harker's insurance company had settled the first claim, but the liability was adding up. The insurance company was threatening to cancel his coverage. Harker was facing somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. Karen learned this through the small-town rumor mill. Rhonda mentioned it casually one day at the office. "I heard old Harker's insurance might drop him. That fence has caused him a world of problems." Karen felt something in her chest, not satisfaction exactly, but recognition of a pattern. Harker had destroyed her Mercedes. Now circumstances were destroying Harker. Not directly, not maliciously, but through the same kind of consequence and chain reaction that had defined her own situation. She thought about going to see him again, offering to help somehow. But what help could she offer? What did she have that he needed? Money that she didn't have. Connections that wouldn't matter. Sympathy, maybe. But sympathy was often just pity, and Harker was too proud for that. The thing that surprised Karen about getting older was how much less black and white everything became. When she was younger, Karen had believed in justice. A person did something wrong, they faced consequences. A person worked hard, they succeeded. The world operated on a moral calculus that was comprehensible and fair. But the older she got, the more she saw that the world was just a series of dominoes, and you never knew which one you were knocking over. Harker hadn't meant to destroy her car. The fence breaking wasn't a moral failure. It was maintenance deferred and weather patterns and bad luck. Karen's pursuit of justice for that accident had set off its own series of consequences that were now affecting Harker in ways that seemed disproportionate to his actual negligence. This was the understanding that kept Karen up at night sometimes. Not anger, understanding. She was in this headspace when Patricia Holt ran into her at the grocery store. Patricia was in the produce section, examining avocados with the precision of someone shopping for a photo shoot. She looked up and saw Karen, and smiled in that particular way that said she'd been thinking about Karen, but wasn't quite sure if she wanted to engage. "Karen, I haven't seen you in forever," Patricia said. "I've been around," Karen said. "How are you?" "Actually, I'm moving," Patricia said brightly. "Remember how I mentioned the area might not be as desirable after the whole cow incident? Well, I found something closer to the city. Better schools, better market. It's actually working out really well for me." Karen understood. The cow had destroyed Karen's car, but it had also given Patricia a narrative, a reason to leave. Sometimes catastrophe was opportunity in disguise. Sometimes disaster was just a plot point in someone else's story. That's great, Karen said, and she meant it. She truly did. I'm happy for you. Are you staying in the area? Patricia asked, and the question had a specific undertone. Are you staying in this neighborhood? Are you maintaining property values? Yeah, Karen said. I like it here. Emma's got her therapist and her school and her friends. I don't want to uproot her. That makes sense, Patricia said, and there was something in her expression that was almost apologetic. The area's still nice. I just think for my situation, the city makes more sense. Karen wanted to tell her that that was fine, that neighborhoods changed, that property values fluctuated, that the whole concept of maintaining value was sort of a trap anyway, but Patricia already knew that. Patricia was making a choice based on information and opportunity. That was fine. That was just life. After they parted ways, Karen finished her shopping and drove home in the RAV4 and sat on her porch and watched the sun set. Her house was worth less now than it had been 6 months ago. The cow incident had done that. The market had adjusted. The narrative had shifted. She found she didn't care. Emma had a therapy appointment that afternoon. Karen drove her to the therapist's office, a gentle place with soft lighting and comfortable furniture, where Dr. Liu worked with Emma on her anxiety spirals. Afterward, driving back home, Emma asked, "Do you think about the cow a lot?" "Sometimes," Karen said. "Why?" "Because you seem different," Emma said. "Lighter, like the thing that was weighing on you is gone." "The thing that was weighing on me," Karen said slowly, "was me. The cow just made it visible." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad the cow hit your car." Karen laughed, really laughed. "Yeah." "Yeah," Emma said. "Because you're way more fun now. You're like actually here. You're not always thinking about how things look." That afternoon, Karen did something she'd been putting off. She called the real estate office and formally reduced her hours again. This time, she proposed a part-time arrangement. 4 days a week, no more. She'd handle a limited number of clients. She'd give up her competitive position entirely. Her broker resisted. "Karen, you're good at this, really good. Aren't you going to miss it?" "I'm going to miss some aspects of it," Karen said honestly. "But I need to not miss Emma. I need to not miss my life. And right now, those things feel like they're at odds." By the end of the conversation, she'd negotiated a part-time arrangement. A slightly reduced commission structure, but also significantly reduced pressure. She'd work Monday through Thursday. She'd be home by 5. She'd have 3-day weekends. It was a profound reduction in income. It was also a profound expansion of everything else. The news about Harker reached Karen through Rhonda, who'd heard it from someone who'd heard it from someone else. Harker had decided to retire. He was selling the farm. Another family was taking it over, a younger couple probably, with different ideas about fence maintenance and liability. Harker was moving to be closer to his daughter in Kansas. Karen thought about going to say goodbye, but sometimes the graceful thing was to let people leave without adding another person to their departure. Some goodbyes were better left a year after the cow destroyed the Mercedes. Karen's life had reorganized itself around a completely different center of gravity. She was no longer chasing visible success. She was building an actual life. The RAV4 was still practical and gray. It had picked up some dings, a shopping cart in a parking lot, a low branch in a parking garage, the minor collisions of being a vehicle used for actual purposes rather than display. Karen fixed the ones that mattered and ignored the ones that didn't. Emma was doing well. The anxiety medications had been adjusted, and therapy had become an integrated part of her life. She had good weeks and harder weeks, but she had tools now. She had Dr. Liu who understood her, and she had a mother who was present. Karen started having dinner with Emma every night. Real dinner, cooked meals, conversations, time. Sometimes Emma brought Sage over and they'd cook together and listen to music and talk about the things 16-year-olds talk about. Karen mostly listened. Listening was the gift. She'd started dating again, but differently this time. A man named Daniel, a teacher who'd come into her real estate office needing a rental property. He was a few years younger than her, with gray in his hair and a gentle way of moving through the world. They'd gotten coffee, then dinner. Now they were seeing each other once or twice a week, taking it slowly with no expectations. "What happened to Mark?" Daniel had asked early on. "I realized he represented a person I was trying to be," Karen said, "and I don't want to be that person anymore." "Who was that person?" Daniel asked. "Younger," Karen said, More impressive, more successful, more visible. She paused. Basically, more like everyone else who's trying really hard to seem fine. Daniel had understood. He'd been married once, he'd explained. To someone who needed him to be a certain way, it had almost destroyed him. Now he was learning to just be. It was harder than it sounded, but it was better. The only real complication in Karen's reorganized life came in the form of an email. It arrived on a Tuesday morning from an address she didn't recognize, harkersfarm@gmail.com. Karen opened it and found a letter, scanned, and converted to a PDF. Dear Miss Mitchell, I hope this finds you well. I'm writing because I learned, through mutual acquaintances, that you're doing better, that you've reduced your hours at work and you're spending more time with your daughter and that you're happier. I wanted to tell you that I'm glad. I've been thinking about that day, the day the cow hit your car, and about everything that came afterward. I've been thinking about how I was angry at you for pursuing the lawsuit and how I didn't understand that you were just trying to make things right. I've been thinking about how that anger kept me stuck, even after we settled. I sold the farm. I couldn't make the economics work anymore, the liability issues, the insurance, the sense that I was always one disaster away from losing everything. It felt like the universe was telling me to stop. I've moved to Kansas to be near my daughter. I'm working at a smaller operation, managing cattle but not owning them. It's less responsibility. It's less risk. It's also less stress, and I've realized that's worth something. I wanted to reach out because I owe you an apology, not just for the fence or the cow, but for how I handled the aftermath. I was defensive when you were just trying to protect yourself. I escalated when I could have been graceful, and because of that, I missed an opportunity to just talk to you, to understand that you were going through something similar to what I was going through. Losing something you've built, or losing something you thought was important, it changes you. I wanted you to know that your car situation and my farm situation are different on the surface, but they taught us the same lesson. I'm going to be in town for one more weekend, this coming Saturday and Sunday. I'd like to buy you and Emma coffee if that's possible. I know that might be strange, but I'd like to try. If you're interested, let me know. Best regards, Robert Harker. Karen read the letter 3 times. She felt her chest do something complicated, not anger, not forgiveness exactly, but something like recognition, understanding. A sense that Harker had been on his own version of her journey and they'd finally arrived at the same place. She called Harker's number, which was now listed, and they arranged to meet at a coffee shop in town on Saturday morning. She didn't tell Emma until the night before. We're having coffee with the cow farmer, Emma said. The guy whose cow hit your car. The guy whose cow hit my car, Karen confirmed. He wanted to apologize and to say goodbye before he moves permanently. Are you okay with that? Emma asked. Yeah, Karen said. Actually, I think I am. Saturday morning came. Karen and Emma drove to the coffee shop in the RAV4. They parked and went inside and found Harker already there, sitting at a table with 2 cups of coffee. He looked different, lighter somehow. He'd cut his hair and he was wearing a clean shirt and his face had lines but also something like peace. Karen, Emma, he said, standing to greet them. Thank you for coming. They sat. Emma looked between her mother and Harker like she was trying to understand the subtext. I wanted to apologize, Harker said directly. For what happened, yes, but more for how I handled it. I was scared. I was scared about money and about the lawsuit and about having failed to maintain my property properly. And instead of just acknowledging that, I made it worse by being defensive. I was also wrong, Karen said. She'd practiced this. She still wanted to be honest. I was upset about losing the car, but I was really upset about what the car represented. It represented something about myself that turned out to be false. I was looking for a reason to be angry, and you gave me one, so I took it. I'm selling the farm, Harker said. I think you might know that. Karen nodded. I'm selling it because that whole situation, the fence, the cow, the lawsuits, it made me realize I was holding on to something that was too heavy, Harker said. I was defined by that farm, by being a farmer, and when the farm started to become a liability instead of an asset, I didn't know who I was anymore. He paused and looked at Emma. Your mother figured that out faster than I did. She figured out that she could let go of something that was supposed to define her and she'd still be herself. She'd actually be more herself. The cow helped, Karen said quietly. Harker laughed, a real laugh. I guess it did. They had coffee together. They talked about small things. Emma asked about Duchess, and Harker explained that the cow had gone to a small farm in Kansas with him. She was older now, calmer, less inclined to destroy property. They talked about the new family buying the farm. They talked about Kansas and city life and how strange it was to not be living in the place where you'd spent 40 years. When it was time to go, Harker stood and thanked them for coming. "I'm sorry I couldn't have understood this sooner," he said to Karen. "I'm sorry I made everything so difficult." "We're sorry too," Karen said, "for how we handled it on our end." "Do you still think about the cow?" Harker asked. Karen considered the question. "Sometimes," she said. "Not with anger anymore, just with this sense of, I don't know, recognition, like the cow was the moment everything needed to change, and it did." Harker nodded. "That's a good way to think about it." He gave Emma a $20 bill before they left and told her to do something nice for herself. Emma accepted it awkwardly, but also accepted it. Sometimes grace was just letting people do small kindnesses without making a big deal of it. In the car on the way home, Emma said, "He's not as bad as I thought he was." "He's not bad at all," Karen said. "He's just a person trying to figure it out like everyone else." "Like you," Emma said. "Like me," Karen agreed. That afternoon, Karen went to see Rhonda at the real estate office. "Hey, I wanted to tell you something," Karen said. "I've really enjoyed the part-time arrangement, and I'm thinking about taking it even further." Rhonda's face went carefully neutral. "How much further?" "I'm thinking about stepping back entirely," Karen said. "Maybe in the next 6 months or so. I've realized that this job, while it's been good for me, it's still keeping me hooked into the same narrative. I'm still building an identity around external success. It's just quieter now." "What will you do instead?" Rhonda asked. "I don't know yet," Karen said. "Maybe I'll teach. I've been thinking about that. I've got time in my life now. Time is the thing I actually want." Rhonda smiled. "That's a good realization to come to. Most people wait until retirement." "The cow helped," Karen said, and Rhonda laughed. By the end of the month, Karen had started the paperwork to get her teaching certification. It would take a year to complete. In that year, she'd transition out of real estate gradually. By next summer, she could potentially start teaching in the fall. She didn't tell Daniel about this plan for a while. They were taking things slowly, remember. But when she finally did, he said, "That makes sense. I always thought you'd make a good teacher. You listen to people." 2 years after the cow destroyed the Mercedes, Karen was standing in front of a classroom of high school students, teaching them about real estate market trends as a way to explore economics and data analysis. The job had been easier to transition into than she'd expected. The school district was happy to have someone with actual real estate experience teaching the practical economics class. The pay was less than what Karen had been making, significantly less, but it was enough. Combined with a modest savings and Daniel's teacher salary they'd moved in together the previous year, it was enough. Emma was in college now, ironically studying business. She'd gone through a lot of therapy in the intervening 2 years, and she was doing well. She had good days and harder days, but she had tools. She had resilience. Most importantly, she had a mother who was present for the hard days but didn't make the hard days about herself. The anxiety had become more manageable. Emma was learning that she could feel anxious and still function. That feelings weren't identity, that she was allowed to be a person with anxiety rather than an anxious person. Karen had discovered something similar about herself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when an envelope arrived at the school addressed to Karen Mitchell. The return address said, Harker Family Farms, Kansas Division. Karen opened it during her planning period. Inside was a photograph and a handwritten letter. The photograph showed Harker, his daughter, and 3 children who must have been his grandchildren. They were standing in front of a much smaller farm operation than the one he'd owned in Missouri. Everyone was smiling. The letter read, Dear Karen, I wanted to send you this and let you know that everything is good. The move to Kansas was the right decision. I'm helping my daughter's family with their cattle operation, but I'm also just spending time with my grandchildren. I'm learning to be a grandfather instead of just a farmer, which is teaching me that identity is a flexible thing. I've been thinking about our conversation at the coffee shop and about what you said about the cow being the moment everything needed to change. I wanted to tell you that I've come to see that same cow the same way. That fence falling down was the moment I needed to let go, and I'm grateful for it now. I'm not grateful that it destroyed your car. I'm grateful that it forced both of us to reckon with what we were holding on to. I thought you might like to know that Duchess is doing well. She's getting old. Cattle don't live forever. But she's in a good home, eating well, no longer escaping fences. Take care of yourself and Emma. I think you're both going to be just fine. Best regards, Robert. P.S. I think about that day sometimes, too. Not with regret, but with understanding. Some events are pivot points. We get to choose what we do with them. Corinne read the letter twice, then placed it carefully in her desk drawer. She had a classroom to teach in 5 minutes. That evening, she shared the letter with Daniel. They were sitting on the porch of their house. A different house than Corinne's original one, a smaller house that they'd bought together, chosen deliberately rather than defaulted into. He's doing well, Daniel observed. He is, Corinne said, and he's right, that cow was a pivot point. Are you glad, Daniel asked. That the cow hit my car, Corinne laughed. That's a weird question. Is it? Daniel asked. You wouldn't be a teacher right now if the car hadn't been destroyed. You wouldn't be here with me. Emma wouldn't have gotten help as early as she did. Corinne considered this. I think I'm glad about the outcome, she said carefully. I'm not sure I'm glad about the pathway that got me here. I would have made these choices eventually, just without the crisis. Would you? Daniel asked. I'm not sure I would have. I think sometimes we need the crisis to force us to see what we've been avoiding. Corinne leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. The sun was setting. The RAV4 sat in the driveway, still practical and gray and real. In the distance, she could hear someone's lawn mower. Normal sounds, normal evening. I never thought I'd be grateful for a cow, Corinne said. Most people aren't, Daniel said. That's kind of special. At school the next day, Corinne mentioned the letter to one of her students, a girl named Mia who was writing an essay about how difficult life events can create positive change. So the cow was basically a gift, Mia asked. I wouldn't say gift, Corinne said. I'd say necessary. Sometimes the universe has to destroy the thing we're clinging to in order for us to see that we can survive without it. But what if we can't? Mia asked. What if we survive the destruction but we don't survive the after? Corinne thought about Emma's anxiety attack. She thought about Harker's exhaustion. She thought about her own desperation to prove herself. Then you get help, Corinne said. You reach out, you admit you're struggling, you don't do it alone. But people don't like admitting that, Mia said. No, they don't, Corinne agreed. But that's the lie. The lie is that you're supposed to figure it out on your own. The truth is that surviving is a community activity. You need witnesses, you need help. And that's not weakness. That's actually the strongest thing a person can do. That weekend, Corinne called Emma. Hi, Mom, Emma said. She was in the library, Corinne could tell from the echo of her voice. Hi, sweetheart, Corinne said. How's studying? It's fine, Emma said. I'm working on an economics paper, ironically about real estate markets. Wonderful, Corinne said. I was calling because I wanted to check in. How are you doing? I'm okay, Emma said, and Corinne had learned to trust this answer. When Emma said she was okay, she generally was. When she wasn't okay, she said something different now, something more specific. They'd learned to communicate more clearly over the past 2 years. I got a letter from Robert Harker, Corinne said. Do you remember him? The cow farmer? Yeah, I remember, Emma said. He's doing well. He sent a picture. He's a grandfather now. That's nice, Emma said. Mom, can I ask you something? Always, Corinne said. Do you regret the Mercedes? Emma asked. Do you wish it hadn't gotten destroyed? Corinne thought about the question carefully. She thought about who she'd been when she bought that car. She thought about who she'd become after it was destroyed. No, she said finally. I don't regret it, I think I needed to lose it to understand that I didn't need it. That sounds weird. It sounds like growth, Emma said. That's what Dr. Liu would call it, turning crisis into awareness. Dr. Liu is smart, Corinne said. Yeah, Emma said. You should probably pay her more. Corinne laughed. I wish I could. After they hung up, Corinne sat in the living room with Daniel and thought about the journey. From the moment she'd stood in her driveway with coffee in hand, admiring the Mercedes, to this moment, sitting in a different house with a different man, being a different person. The change had been forced. It had been painful, but it had also been necessary. In the end, that's all a cow had really been, necessary. Karen was at a farmer's market in a city 2 hours away from where she'd been living. She was there with Daniel, buying vegetables for a dinner party they were planning. Emma was coming home from college for the weekend. Sage was coming too. They were going to cook together. Karen was examining tomatoes, the same kind of tomatoes she'd bought from Harker's booth all those years ago, when she heard her name. Karen Mitchell. She turned and found a woman she didn't immediately recognize. "It's Patricia," the woman said. "Patricia Holt, we were neighbors." Karen did recognize her now. Patricia looked different, still elegant, still put together, but different. Less like someone performing success and more like someone just existing. "Patricia, of course," Karen said. "How are you?" "I'm good," Patricia said. "I sold the house in Missouri, moved closer to the city like I said I would, bought a place in a newer development." She paused. "It's been nice, but honestly, I miss the old place sometimes. It had character." Karen understood. The old place had character because it had been lived in. The old place had history. The old place was real. "I see you're still in the area," Patricia asked. "I am," Karen said. "I teach now, economics and business at the high school, and Daniel, I got remarried. We bought a smaller house." "That's wonderful," Patricia said, and Karen could tell she meant it. "I heard you left real estate. That was surprising to me, honestly. You were so good at it." "I was good at the performance of it," Karen said. "The actual selling was the easy part. What I love is teaching people to think critically about their choices." They talked for a few more minutes. Patricia mentioned that the neighborhood had become more residential, less development-focused. It had improved in some ways, declined in others. Life happened, she said, and that changed things. As Patricia was leaving, she said, "Karen, I wanted to say something. That day when your car got hit, I remember thinking it was awful for you, but also, I remember thinking it might be good, like good for you to have to let something go. I hope that doesn't sound cruel." Karen considered it. "I don't think it sounds cruel," she said. "I think it sounds honest. It was good for me in the end. It was just difficult to get there." "The best things usually are," Patricia said. That evening, Emma and Sage arrived at Karen and Daniel's house. They'd rearranged the kitchen furniture for efficiency. 3 women cooking was a different energy than 1 woman trying to impress. They made pasta from scratch, the way Emma had learned in a culinary interest course at college. They made salad with Harker's tomatoes that now came from a different farm, but tomatoes that reminded Karen of growth and understanding and grace. Over dinner, Emma told them about a project she was working on for her economics class, an analysis of rural economies and how small farming operations were adapting to climate change and market pressures. "It's interesting," Emma said, "because farming isn't just an economic model, it's a way of living. And when the economics fail, the whole lifestyle fails. That's what happened to Mr. Harker, I think. He wasn't just losing a farm, he was losing an identity." "That's exactly right," Karen said. "And that's why it was so hard for him to accept at first. He didn't know who he was without the farm." "Do you think he knows now?" Emma asked. Karen thought about the photograph, Harker with his grandchildren smiling. "I think he's learning," Karen said. "I think all of us are." Later, after Sage had gone home and Emma was asleep in her room, home for the weekend, still a part of this household in a way that mattered, Karen and Daniel stood on the porch. "Good day?" Daniel asked. "Really good," Karen said. "I ran into Patricia Holt, my old neighbor. She was one of the people I thought needed to understand that what happened with the cow was actually a good thing, even though it destroyed my car. But she was just being honest. She recognized that I needed the push." "Do you think people need that?" Daniel asked. "A push?" "I think some people do," Karen said. "I think I did. I was going to keep performing indefinitely, keep trying to be impressive, keep building a narrative that wasn't real. Someone had to destroy the narrative for me to see that it was just performance." "And now?" Daniel asked. "Now I'm just here," Karen said. She gestured at the house, at their life, at the practical choices and real relationships and genuine work. "And here is pretty good." The RAV4 sat in the driveway, a 3-year-old vehicle now with various dings and dents. It was reliable and practical and boring and perfect. Somewhere in Kansas, Duchess the cow was getting older. Somewhere in Missouri, a new farmer was trying to maintain fences and manage liability and figure out who he was through the work. And here, on this porch, in this unremarkable moment, Karen understood that she was finally the person she'd been trying to perform all along. Not impressive, not successful, just present, just real.